I'll connect the audio. Yes, let's see. Let's speak to chicken. Right. 1 second. They make show us. Okay, we're just doing.
You hear us, Wagner?
Yeah, I hear you. Good Vach.
Vach.
Start
naked.
L'chaim u'lebracha, a gute Vach. Mazel tov nasi, so sein a shnas hatzlacha, b'gashmis, b'beruchnis. Sein a tamim, and give the Rebbe nachas ruach. Today was Parshas B'Shalach, and we darf the Rebbe mit the tribe. In Parshas B'Shalach, there's two stories of two milchamas, and the Rebbe asks a the obvious question, and the Kutisiches Chelik Aleph, I'm sure many of you learned it, that Pasha das warft sich in the Eigen, when you learn Pshut Shemikra, when you learn the Parsha, that there's two stories of two milchamas, two wars that the Yidden were threatened with two very, very different reactions that they were supposed to have. In the beginning of the Parsha was a milchama with Parei Hikriv. Parei was chasing after the Yidden. And we know in Chazal it says there was Dalet Kites, there was one group of Yidden that wanted to fight. They wanted to make a milchama with Parei. But one thing we know for sure, the Pasuk says clearly that the Yidden's instructions were nicht schlagen sich mit them. Havaye yilachim lachem va'atem tachrishon. Habt nicht was zum milchama halten. You have nothing to fight a war with Parei. The Eibishter fights your wars with you. Atem tachrishon, your avedas dabra b'nei Yisrael v'Yisrael. In the end of the parsha is done Nacha Melchama, Amalek, Vayave Amalek, Vayilachem in Yisrael B'Refidim, and over there the Yidden had to fight the war by themselves. There was no more Havaya Yilachem Lachem. There the Seder was that the Yidden themselves had to be a Bechar Lanu Anashim, V'tzei Yilachem Ba'Amalek. What was such a big drastic change from the beginning of the parsha to the end of the parsha? From Avayi Yilachem Lachem, Hatem Tachrishon, to Tzei Yilachem Ba'Amalek, that the Yidden had to fight their own war. It's a strong question in Pshutei Shamikra, an obvious question. And the Rebbe says a very, very powerful answer. The rabbi says there's a basic difference between the two milchamas. By milchamas, Parei was behind the Yidden. He was chasing them from behind. What was he standing between? He was standing between the Yidden and Mitzrayim. And this they lost that the Yidden should be able to get back to Mitzrayim because he was blocking their way. In Mitzrayim was B'Shiftenu Asir Abasar. In Mitzrayim was where they had a matzav of Ichlu Eschel of Haaretz, where the Eibishter himself set it up as the Yidden's own canon haben Kotu Selo, they should have good Gashmias. For the good Gashmias, darf man nicht Milchama haben. The Eibishter said, Havai Yilochem Lachem Ba'atem Tachrishon. Hagam the Parei wanted Rachmanu Litzlan to kill the Yidden. Omar Oyev Erdei Fa'aseg Achalik Shalom. Nevertheless, Salar Zagin, it's not your problem, it's not your business, it's not your concern. Came Amalek. Amalek stood in the way between the Yidden and Matan Torah. Amalek stood blocking the Yidden from V'yiso, from traveling forward and onward towards Har Sinai, towards Kabbalah Satera. Amalek was a shter to the Haitavdunas Alikim Alahar Hazeh. And that is Nishtakim Breira Kaviyachol. There had to be Tsehi Lachem Ba'amalek. There the Yidden had to go fight. If there's an interference with Eisfir and Dain Kavana, with Gain Mekabel Zain the Torah, so then had to be Tsehi Lachem Ba'amalek. There had to be Anshe Mesha. There had to be B'Mesiras Nefesh. Like Rashi says, Tsei Min Ha'anan. They had to go out of the protective area that they got from the Anania Kaveh, or Merchama Haltimit Amalek, which has this Asher Karcha. That's the Nekuda of the Rebbe's beer, or Meredike beer. And this is a very, very important lesson that we all have in our lives. Everyone has in their lives challenges, milchames that are like Parei. Parei was a Rasha Merusha. He was someone who was at Kefer given in the Eibishter. He said, Lo yadaiti asavaya. He said, Liya eiri vani asisini, that he made himself. He was Kefer in the whole existence of the Eibishter. He killed the Yidden, he killed the Jewish babies, and he bathed himself in their blood. Achzarius neira. Nevertheless, and he was trying to kill the Yidden now. Arek charbi terishei meyadi. Nevertheless, he wasn't standing in the way of Yidden going to Kabbalah Satera. He was a threat from behind. Das darf nicht Tefes Makim sein. He's interfering with Yidden being able to continue to enjoy Mitzrayim. The Ichlu Eschel of Haaretz. The Ichlu Eschel of Haaretz was the Ratzin of the Eibishter while they were in Mitzrayim. That a Yid should have cult of Sela Begashmias, that's the Kavana Al-Yena. Yidden are B'nai Melachim, says the Gemara, every Yid it is deserving of Asudas Shleime Beis Malchusei. Nevertheless, when there's something that interferes with that, darfst dich nicht vernehmen mit dem. Kannst nicht haben dein Tanuge Elam Haza, leave it to the Eibishter. Havaya Yilachem Lachem V'atem Tacharishon. Inyanim Gashmim are being threatened, leave it to the Eibishter. You don't have to worry yourself about that. It says in Peilish Svarim, Havaya Yilachem Lachem, the Eibishter wird euch zustellen Brot, Miloshen Lachem. The Eibishter will give you your bread. You have to make yourself a keli, but the Eibishter will provide what you need. You don't have to worry about the interfere, about the zeitige threats. That you're not able to go forward to Kabbalah Satera, as a Yid Kenish learning and davening, when there's something that stands in the way, that challenges our Kabbalah Satera, Tavdunas Alikim Alahar Hazeh, that's the Tachlis HaKavana Vayitzias Mitzrayim. There you can't say, I'm leaving it to the Eibishter. Over here, the bottom line has to happen, that we have to, we have to carry out our mission and our Kavana to din in the Eibishter, Tavdunas Alikim, to learning and davening. And if something stands in the way of that, we can't ignore that, and we can't disregard it. We have to go by Mesiras Nefesh, as the Bechar Lanu Anashim, as the Anshi Moshe say, Afilu Areis came from the Anan, even to go out of our comfort zone, even to go out of our protective zone, and to go have a Muhammad and to fight against these Meniyas V'Ikuvim. There's a famous story that the Rebbe Rashab was by Asifas HaRabbanim once, together with other Rabbanim, together with Reb Chaim Brisker, and they were working on a certain Inyan that was Negiah for Yidden and for Yiddishkeit, as Yidden sollen kennen, dienen der Eibishter Kiddeboy. And they worked very hard on it. They worked with Mesiras Nefesh. And in the end, that time, they weren't successful. And afterwards, Reb Chaim Brisker came to the Rebbe Rashab, to his hotel room. I think he was in a hotel. And he came to the Rebbe Rashab, and he saw that the Rebbe Rashab was sitting in his room and was crying. And Reb Chaim said to him, Lubavitch Rebbe, for was weint ihr? He said, why are you crying? He said, we did whatever we could. We did whatever was possible. We went even with Mesiras Nefesh. No one could have any complaints against us. No one could have any blame on us that it's our fault as Matnishteiski. This wasn't the Eibishter's hands. So the Rebbe Rashab told him that's the difference between a poyel, a worker, and a balisik. A worker and a boss. A worker in a company, if he did a good job, he did whatever he's able. So if he wasn't successful, farfallen, no one could blame him. All he has to worry about is that he shouldn't be able to be blamed. The balabas, sof kol sof, if he's not successful, he loses the money. The Rebbe Rashab told him that with Yiddishkeit, Eden is like a balabas. Asek patera. You have to be there like the Baal Asek, that you're the balabas. If it's something that we know that Akil Yaakov Ayadayim the Esav on that dafim milchama halten, here we don't throw it on the Eibishter and we don't depend on the Eibishter, but it has to be Tzei Hilachim Ba'amalek. We have to go and fight a war, and even if it's a war that Al Piderech HaTeva we're not able to win, by the war with Amalek, the Yidden didn't have a possibility Al Piderech HaTeva because the Amalekim, like Rashi says, and Chazal say, they were Mechashvim. They knew in Yanim of Kishav, and they were able to see with their magical powers that they're able to win. And nevertheless, the Yidden went on Mesiras Nefesh. They didn't take into consideration natural causes, because if something stands in the way of learning and davening, of Teiro mitzvahs, of Tavdun Asalikim Alahar Azeh, of Din in the Eibishter, if it blocks us, then we take whatever means are possible and whatever means are necessary and whatever means are available. Habi Unkum and Suhar Sinai to the Tavdun Asalikim. And this we all have to know when it comes Parshas B'Shalach, is Levin Mitzasait, is Niskarim V'Nasim, Levin Dehira, Nachamo, the Ra that the Rebbe gives us, that anything that we have a problem, people have problems in life and they have difficulties. If it's a difficulty that's behind us, das heißt, dass das nicht zwischen uns und Lernen und Davening, darf man nicht misyache sein mit dem, as they feel. Then says the Eibishter, Havayi Yilachem Lachem Va'atem Tachrishim. Tachrishim means bittul. We have to make sure that we have Kabbalah Sale, that we have the bittul, and the Eibishter will pour everything into our hands. There was once a shliach in the Midwest in America, and he was building a building. He was building, I think it was a $4 million building. It was in the middle of America. It wasn't in a big city like Cincinnati or something. It was a small little Midwest city, and his friends, one of his friends, so he was doing a campaign and doing a fundraiser. You have to get the $3 or $4 million, whatever it is. Now, actually, he was building a building. I think it was $7 million was the story. $7 million. So one of his chaverim asked him. He said, "In your place, it's not a big city; it's a smaller city. Everything is more low key. If you make a building for $1 or $2 million in your city, it'll be considered a very big building. To make a $7 million building, it's not me. It's like seems like it's an effort that's unnecessary." So the shliach said to his friend, he said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Ich the Rebbe gist." He said, "I see the Rebbe is pouring down hashpois." So I'm not going to catch it. I'm not going to take it. When it comes to all our gashmistic needs, when it comes to all our zaitig etzaris, when it comes to a party that's behind us, is the Eibishter Gis, to Tzavayi Yilachem Lachem, our Aveda is only to be a Keli, and to be a Keli is Va'atem Tachrishim. Taka also work. Without Arbitim, Tachrishim, the word says Akirin. We have to work on ourselves. Tachrishim and Chassidus is quiet, is bittul. We have to be mevatel ourselves and strengthen our Kabbalah Seir. But it's not our war. We don't have to fight the war. The Eibishter fights the war for us. Only when there's something that's blocking us, as a Kenish left, standing and not letting me learn, standing and not letting me daven. So even if I have to take a takef and say Hilachem B'Amalek, and there's many different Yetzaharas that everyone knows, also for Bachrim, that sometimes there's something that stands and tries to distract you or disturb you, or they're upkilling there. That was the inyan of Amalek is Kriros. The inyan of Amalek was upkilling. Like, it doesn't let you have, tries to tell you not to have the flam fire that we learned yesterday in Hayim Yem, that a Yid is supposed to have in all inyanim of Teiro mitzvahs, is of them that Figenach Mesiras Nefesh with the full takef, and tell the Yitzhahara Shterminish, my inyan is gain sutavzin as alakim al harazah, and all other inyanim is by me in ganzen Nishtefes Makim. L'chaim u'bracha. Dr. Nigel. Hey, yeah, da da da, L'chaim u'bracha. This Shabbos, l'chaim u'bracha. For you, this Shabbos is a very special Shabbos. For all of us, and for you especially. Because this is the Shabbos, that's the Vayichulu, that's the Shleimus, after coming back from spending Yud Shvat by the Rebbe. Yud and Yud Aleph Shvat you spent by the Rebbe, right? In the Dalet Amos of the Rebbe. And now you came back, and this is the first Shabbos. That Shabbos is the Vayichulu, like the Rebbe speaks many, many times, Milash Shleimus, that Shabbos elevates and brings a Shleimus to all the inyanim of the previous week. So when it's the Shabbos, that's after the time spent by the Rebbe. That the time spent by the Rebbe for a chassid is a very, very important and central inyan in his life. Like the famous word of Chassidim that everyone knows, Rebbe Leishan Achia Minayin, as Mefardish so a Rebbe Imal Ayar Hapmin Vufavu Net Mechayas, that the Chassid takes his chayas from those special times that he's able to spend by the Rebbe and going to the Rebbe. So when you come back to Shabbos afterwards, like the Rebbe spoke to Lashon, that's when it's the time when you have to unpack the Pekalach. This is a time when you have to evaluate and analyze and figure out was mat genommen von sein beim Rebbe, and make sure that it's something that continues to be with you, to fuel you, to power you, and to inspire you as Mizal das Name weiter to actually live like a Tamim who gives the Rebbe nachas ruach. The Rebbe spoke once by a Shabbos Bereishis farbrengen, and the Rebbe said a story about how when the trains were first invented, before trains, how did people travel? With a horse and wagon. Someone richer had 2 horses, a big veer had 4 horses, someone who, what was the Rolls Royce was 6 horses, but you had a horse, as many horses as you did a wagon, as fast as the horses could go. If there was something blocked the horses, and if the horse got sick or he died or it got stubborn, is weiter given a shter. And then they invented the trains, that the train went faster and smoother and clearer. When sie given a ganze chiddush Maaseh Bereishis, in every country and every city and every neighborhood, people came to the train stations to watch this new chiddush in Maaseh Bereishis, that a horseless carriage, that there's no horses schlepping it in a gate. And people came to see it with their own eyes, to believe it, and to convince themselves. So the Rebbe said the story that it happened also in Italy, that they had their first train. After trains were invented, they built the first train station and tracks in Italy. And there's all these cars, this long, long train. When people are waiting to see that this long train, there's no horses pulling it. Something that before that wasn't fathomable, wasn't imaginable. And they went there just like in all the other countries where it happened. And the people gathered around and they're standing and they're watching. And there was the noise and there was the usual, the pfeifen, like it says. But the train, all these cars, the big long train didn't move. What happened, the Rebbe said? In Italy, they forgot to connect the engine, the first car, with, you have to attach it to the rest of the cars, which is the whole train. So therefore the engine went, the engine had the steam and had the power and it went, but the whole long train that everyone was watching is geblieben bim, it wasn't pulled because it wasn't connected to the engine. So the Rebbe said this was a mashal, then was a farbrengen of Shabbos Bereishis. The Rebbe said this is a mashal for Shabbos Bereishis, that Tishrei is like the engine, that it has the keiches, it has the steam, it has the energy, it has the force and the power to schlep in the galat all the rest of the days of the year, which is the boxes of the train, the cars of the train. But you have to connect it. You have to find a way to attach the engine with the rest of the cars. If not, the engine could be as good as it is with all the giluyim and all the keiches, aber it did gar nicht tuf. The same exact lesson is for the Shabbos after Yud Shvat. That the Shabbos after Yud Shvat is the same thing that you had the keiche when you're by the Rebbe. That's always an engine. The time spent in the Rebbe's Dal Damas, that's an engine that has this meredike kayach that's able to schlep in there and ufheb in there, aresh schleppen from blotter. But nevertheless, in order to implement it, in order to bring it to the payal, there has to be the avodah and the Shabbos afterwards to connect the engine with the rest of the days. That means every single bacher who was zeicher to be by the Rebbe, especially this year, many bachrim were not zeicher. The bachrim in Toronto, only a ma'at mizer, most of them weren't able to be by the Rebbe this year. So you have to appreciate, you had this chus, it's a tremendous chus, and you have to value it and treasure it. But you have to also, now is the time to figure out what's netman for them race. You have to make a cheshbon nefesh and think about what are the keiches, what was the inspiration that you were able to get from being in the Rebbe's Daled Ames, and how could that affect you? How could that influence you? What kind of a change could it make in the Chaye Yem Yemien, in your Kabbalah sale, in your Shmiras Hastarim, in your learning Nikla, in your learning Chassidus, in your Avedas HaTfilah, in your Avas Yisrael, in your Afatzas HaMayanis Chutza, in Kochen Zech in Yani Gula Mashiach, in all of the inyanim that the Rebbe expects from you and demands from you, and that you know that the Rebbe has a nachas ruach when you're able to tell him as the Tustin Dizachen, how are they all going to become better as a result of the time that you spent by the Rebbe? There was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. That the Alter Rebbe once had a kped on him. And the Alter Rebbe didn't want to let him come in to see the Alter Rebbe. And the chassid said, "Ich will reingehen von Tier." The Alter Rebbe said, "Du wirst nicht reingehen von Tier." The chassid said, "Ich will reingehen vom Fenster." He was saying to Alter Rebbe, like, I'll find a way to come in. Couldn't accept the fact that he can't come to the Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe said, "Was nicht reingehen vom Fenster." Chassid said, "I'll come in from the chimney." Alter Rebbe said, "You won't come in from the chimney." And that says the Chassid was trying to find different levels of Mesiras Nefesh, that a way that he could break through this Kpeda. But he wasn't successful. At the end of his life, he was very sick, this Chassid. And his whole body, Le'aleinu, was covered with worms. Tremendous insurim. But he understood that this was from the Kpeda of the Alter Rebbe. And one of the worms would fall on the ground, he would pick it up and put it back onto his body and say, "This is where you belong. This is what's supposed to happen to me." In the end, before he passed away, so right before he passed away, he screamed, "Oy Rebbe." And the Chassidim said, with that Oy Rebbe, he had to go through his period of Alter Rebbe's Kpeda for whatever reason. It was a fum gamla shichna, but in the end, the Oy Rebbe, he broke through all the barriers, and the Alter Rebbe had him a reis geschlagen. That was the chassid by the Alter Rebbe. By us is every chassid we know the Rebbe schleps out. But that depends. We have to do our part to lazen on their lazen, that we should be able to figure out what exactly is going to be the eifen, that the being by the Rebbe is going to change us. What does it mean that a chassid is by the Rebbe? What's by the Rebbe? When everyone learned the Sikha and the Kuntris, Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel, where the Rebbe explains that the Dalet Amos of the Rebbe, that's the Beis HaMikdash. The Rebbe brings from Chazal and from the Gemara the Yosef Mikdash, the Yosef Mikdash v'Yosef Sham. The Beis HaMikdash is the place where Kishem Shabal Leirois Kach Bal Lireis, that over there you see Gili Alikos. Over there there's no hell and behester. What does it mean, Gili Alikos? That over there in the Beis HaMikdash was clear and was visible and was unmistakable, that Eineid Movade, that there's nothing that exists except the Eibishter, that Avayu Alekim. In the world, by us is Elam Pshitas, we're into Inyani Ha'elam. Our reality is Inyani Ha'elam, and we have to fight with ourselves each time that we're doing something that the Eibishter wants, to come to Seder, to learn by Seder, to learn a Sicha, to learn a Maimer, to learn a Blat Gemara. That's not our reality. When it comes to something that our Nefesh HaBahamis appreciates, to eat, to play, to do in Yanim of Elam Haza, those are things that are real and that are tangible and that are strongly Tefes Makim by us. In the Rebbe's Daled Ames, over there is the Beis HaMikdash. Over there is Meir, like it was in the Beis HaMikdash, the Echad, the Emes, that everything is Alikos. And what we take away when we go back from the Rebbe's Daled Ames, and everyone goes back to Ishtachas Gafne, Ishtachas Teinase, was mit darf zurückbringen l'chayle reish, is the gilui that's by the Rebbe's Daled Ames, that the emes, the echad ha'emes, that avayu alikim, that the only thing that's real is alikus, is the Eibishter. But that can't be something that's a philosophy, that's a haskalah, that's a nice idea. The only thing that's real is the Eibishter has to be something that defines the way we live our lives. The way we live our lives is according to what the Eibishter wants. It is based only on how could this be something that brings out into me, by me, a tavdun as alikim, something that's serving the Eibishter, because that's all that exists by me. There's a famous story. There was once a chassid together with a misnagid that were traveling together. And they had to pass on their way. They were both going to the same destination. And they passed through Misnagdish city. This Misnagdish city, they were old-fashioned Misnagdim. They were against Chassidim. They had a rule in their Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir from their Vada Kol that any chassid who passes through their city, they're going to take him into the city hall and lay him down on the table and then get upgraded malchus. That's what they did. But they had a problem. How are they going to know who's a chassid? They'll ask someone if he's a chassid and the person knows it's a Misnagdish city, he's going to be afraid right away. Oh, maybe he wants to know if I'm a chassid mevumir up his ton shlecht. So he's going to have to lie about it. How are they going to figure out who's a chassid? So they decided they'll go in a roundabout way. Whoever comes through their city, they'll call him in for the interrogation, for the investigation. They'll ask him, who do you think about more? Do you think more about yourself? Or do you think more about the Eibishter? So if he says, I think more about myself, then they know he's a misnagid. A misnagid thinks about himself, sounds zif. If he says he thinks more about the Eibishter, oh, he must be a chassid, then they're going to take him to the city hall. They're going to give him the malchus, and that's nice. So the chassid and the misnagid were traveling together, and they both got called into this interrogation committee who has to verify each person's identity as a chassid or a misnagid. So they asked the misnagid first, who do you think about more? You think about yourself or you think about the Eibishter? So the misnagid said, I think about myself. Why did he say that? Because that was the right answer. That was the truth, right? So they thought, he thinks about himself. He's a misnagid like us. They let him go. Then they called in the chassid. So who do you think about more, yourself or the Eibishter? He said, I think about myself. So they let him go. But after they left the city, so the misnagid said to the chassid, he said, I don't understand. I know you. I know you're a chassid. I know you tell the truth always. But you're a chassid. You think about the Eibishter. Maybe we all know the chassidim think about the Eibishter. How did you tell them that you think about yourself? He said, I didn't want to give you away. We're friends, but I don't understand. How could you say such a thing? How could you give such an answer? So the chassid told him, I didn't lie. I told him the truth. I think about myself. He said, I don't have to think about the Eibishter. The Eibishter, I know he exists. There's nothing besides the Eibishter. Einid mulvadim. I think about myself. Do I exist? If everything is the Eibishter, how could I be here? Maybe I'm not here. Because if there's nothing besides the Eibishter, then my existence is not real. It's my imagination. I think about how do I fit into the picture of Einid mulvadim, of Einid, of Atarei Saldas, Ke'avai Elokim Einid. Coming from the Rebbe, we have to take that mindset, that perspective that what exists is the Eibishter. And our existence is that we have to figure out we exist only, Avifel, our existence can sugabin in Kol Ma Shebara Kadosh Baruch Hu Lebrayel L'chvede. We exist only as much as our existence could be a prat in Tavdunas Alekim in making a dira b'tachteinim in the Bishvil Atera and Bishvil Yisrael. And that upward, even though it could sound to you, oh, that's someone you have to be a tzaddik, something very far-fetched. It's not. It's very reachable. It's very realistic. You have to focus on it, and you have to take the keches that you get from being by the Rebbe. So when you come back from the Rebbe, so you have to use out this Shabbos of B'Shalach in order to get the perspective, to take what you're supposed to take. The Rebbe picks us up out of our false outlook, out of our false preoccupation with zich, with ourselves, and the Rebbe stellt uns weg in the ability to say myself, my zich is only a wieviel ich can ausführen in the kavana jena, nor wieviel ich can ausführen in the Eibishter's shlichus. There was once a a writer in Eretz Yisrael who wrote for one of the Fruma newspapers, one of the Fruma Elamish newspapers. His name was Yaakov something. And he wrote an article, he wrote a column in this Fruma newspaper. And he wrote a story about himself. What's the story he wrote? How he used to live in America, and he made Aliyah, he moved to Eretz Yisrael. When he lived in America, he said, his name used to be Fred, that was his English name. But then he went to Eretz Yisrael, and he changed his name to Yaakov. So he writes in his column, why did I change my name to Yaakov? What's now wrong with the name? Why didn't I keep my English name from before that I used so many years? So he wrote that when I came to Eretz Yisrael, so I started using Hebrew instead of English, right? So how do you write Fred in Hebrew? Right, Fei Reish Dalet, right? So every time I did Aliyah, I had to go to a lot of offices, a lot of government officials. All the government officials, they looked at my papers. They said, okay, Mr. Fred this and Mr. Fred that. Everyone's Fei Reish Dalet. They called me Fred. I didn't want to be a Fred, so I changed my name to Yaakov. So then he writes further, why didn't I want to be a Ferd? And that's because of that I changed my name also. So he wrote because of a story that he heard about the Chassidim of the Tzemach Tzedek. Listen to the story. So the Chassidim of the Tzemach Tzedek were once traveling to the Tzemach Tzedek. And they were in the horse and wagon, and they're farbrengen on the way, like Chassidim, on the way to the Rebbe. This is their life. They're farbrengen, they're saying l'chaim. And suddenly, the horse died. The horse that's taking them to the Tzemach Tzedek, to Lubavitch, died. So the Chassidim, so the Balagala, the wagon driver, went to look for another horse. And the Chassidim haben weiter verbracht, right? They continued verbrengen while they're waiting for the new horse. They're still, it doesn't change their destination. It doesn't change their goal. It doesn't change their objective. They're going to the Rebbe. They're going to Lubavitch. But while they're verbrengen, hat sich mis'eder geworden a Shaila. The Chassidim started discussing this horse that suddenly died on the way to Lubavitch. Is he a chassid or a misnagid? What was this horse? They had a chakira. They had a question, a query. So they started debating about it. So a lot of the Chassidim said this horse was a misnagid. Weil macht menias wie kuvim. Chassidim gehen zum Rebbe und hat gepegert. Macht menias wie kuvim. He's making obstacles to Chassidim who are going to the Rebbe. That's what a misnagid, right? A misnagdish horse. But there was one elder chassid, this guy writes, that he said, no, this horse was a chassid. Why was he a chassid? He said, weil hat verstanden, als man geht zum Rebbe, darf man früher werden ausfährt. That when you go to Lubavitch, you go to the Rebbe, darf man werden ausfährt, that they get paid, that given a chassid. So this guy writes this, that's why he didn't want to be a ferd anymore. Aber was ist der Wort von der Chassidim? You go to the Rebbe, you have to be ausfährt. What's a ferd? A horse is a behema. A behema says in the pasuk nefesh a behema hayiredes hilamata. Zieht sich zu gashmias. He's drawn to physical things. He's drawn to enjoyments, to pleasures. He's drawn to whatever will give him satisfaction. Nefesh a behema hayiredes hilamata. The Eibusha b'shafen a behema, that a behema doesn't look up; it looks down. Because its whole world is artsius, is down, is gashmi. That's what a behema is. Adam is nefesh Adam ha'ela hilamayla. Adam tzitzich zu hacher. Adam is a damela elye. The nature of Adam is a tzitzich zu lekus. When we go to the Rebbe, we have to become less of a behema. We can't be involved with artsius, with a lamhaza, mitvelt, with our preoccupation with velt. We have to koch sich in alakus. When we come back from the Rebbe, the cheshbon hanefesh is how much did I take from the keichitz of being by the Rebbe, so a bissel machen ois mein behema. That I should be preoccupied not with myself. A behema is all about himself, his pleasures, his eating, his sleeping, his way of finding satisfaction and enjoying the world. Adam tracht, wie kann ich ausführen the Eibishter's kavanah? Learning and davening the tavdin as alakim ala harazah. And when you come back from the Rebbe gives us the keiches for that. but we have to attach the engine to the rest of the train. As is commonly they pay that for all the coming days, every day, every chassidus, every davening, every time, everything that we do should be recognizable. This is a chassid who came back from the Rebbe, who elevated himself, who went on into the Rebbe's Dal Ames and is continuing to live with the Keshem Shebali Reis, Kach Bali Reis, L'chaim L'bracha. Zaktanigi. Oh, that's what you do, Kiyata, Hashem Livadecha. V'yei dukiyata Shim Hashem levadecha V'yei dukiyata Shim Hashem levadecha V'yei naka V'yei dukiyata Shim Hashem levadecha V'yei dukiyata Shim Hashem levadecha Hashem levadecha El Yei Nakala